Cover 3 podcast. Tom, I love that you did this because your evaluation process is very, very detailed, and you've decided to at least make the results of it public. So, Mikey, let's start. If we get 1 through 25 on the screen, Tom, do you want to just sort of talk through it, or at least like highlight some of the spots that you like the pivot points in the rankings, I guess would be the way I would describe it.
I mean, like it says in the tweet, if you're not reading it, my big board is not positional value, has no basis in this. It is literally just based on your grade, like highest grade to lowest grade in the top 50 grades that I have. So that's why you see Joe Alt is at number 1 and Roma Dunze is at number 2, while Caleb Williams is at 3. Like Caleb Williams is going to be the first pick, but as far as the grade, as what I see, he's not as good of a prospect at quarterback as Roma Dunze is at wide receiver, as good as Joe Alt is at offensive tackle. But other than that, I mean, I'll answer any questions you guys have. But like, as you can see from that top 10, I am really high on the offensive tackles in this class.
Yeah. I mean, so those right now, for those listening on the audio side, that would be Joe Alt at number 1, Fuaga from Oregon State at number 5, Olu Fashanu at number 6, Amarius Mims at 8, JC Latham at 9.
So 5 of the top 10 or 5 of the top 9 are tackles in my grades. It's a really good tackle class.
Fatanu down at 14.
Yeah. It's you're going to see a ton of those guys go tonight.
Do you believe in the top heavy? I've heard that as a narrative that there will be a point where all of a sudden, if you need a tackle, you got to go up and get them, because 3 of those top 5 have been taken, and the drop off from 5 to 6. And I'm not certain if 5 to 6 is the cutoff, but somewhere around there, we've got a big drop off.
And I don't think that's just for tackles this year. Like you have seen in years past, a lot of the quote unquote smart front offices, the analytical front offices, will trade down for more picks because their processes take more swings. See if you can hit more home runs that way. Like the more swings you get, the better odds are of finding something special. I don't think you're going to see that in this year's draft. I think that once you get past the first 2 or 3 rounds, there's not a lot in this class that teams are going to look at and say, oh, that guy's going to be like a late round steal. Like it's going to be a whole lot of cross your fingers and hope for the best.
I mean, the other reason why you want to go up and get him is that your sleeper tackles, by and large, suck.
Yes, they're sleepers for a reason. They don't wake up.
All of the best offensive tackles in the NFL were really high picks who were absolute freaks, unless they played a different sport. Like the Mailata guy for the Eagles, who was a Aussie rules football giant. But like clearly, if he had played any kind of college, he's just one of the best big athletes on the planet Earth. So you either have those like freak show genetics or you don't. If you want to be like an elite level NFL offensive tackle, that's why the picks are relatively safe, and why it's quite risky to take, tackles in the 4th and 5th round. It just, you could say Amarius Mims didn't play very much and the technique needs to clean up. Okay, well, I can probably clean up his technique. I can't make somebody else have the longest arms in the history of the combine. Like they are what they are. So, I mean, that's why you move up for it. Sleeper tackles suck.
Did you guys see? I think this list sucks, by the way. I'm gonna get a Twitter troll. I'm just kidding. Did you guys see the list that Adam Schefter tweeted it out? I think Hembo, Greeny's researcher, put it out about the success rate over the last 20. It was actually from 2000 to 2019, so it was about a 20 year.
God, the research on this was. Did you see
terrible because the way they defined it, the way they
Jalen Ramsey's a bust.
The second contract,
right. It was very subjective, and that was the biggest flaw in it. Was solely based on did you receive a second contract with the team, which Carson Wentz would be deemed a success, and as you mentioned, Jalen Ramsey a failure. So there was some serious flaws with that. I did think, interestingly, that the positions with the most success, according to that metric, were all across the board: center, tackle, guard. The top 3 were all offensive linemen. Regardless of what you think of the way they came up with it, it's still a pretty big body of work, which I do think they're not drafted as much. And when they are taken high, they're pretty certain about them, which is why I do think that having this many tackles that are this good up at the top of the list is probably a good thing and accurate.
It's not easy, but they are far and away the easiest position to evaluate as far as what's going to work and what's not going to work. Because again, it is size. Size is a huge factor, and then you could fix a lot of things. But there's also just the natural athleticism to go with that size. Like you look at a guy like Amarius Mims, and I know the concern is he doesn't have a ton of snaps. there are some health like because he's been banged up. So those are legit concerns, and you can't erase them. But you just look at the person, the size of the man, and the athleticism that he has, and it's like that guy could be one of the best offensive tackles we've ever seen if it hits.
Yes, completely.
You have some, Danny?
I was just going to ask about Caleb Williams, like so if you're looking at like historically, like how do you stack up against the positions? Where do you think Caleb Williams ranks as far as, is he Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, who are like off the charts? Trevor Lawrence was put in that category. I probably had him in there too. I don't know if he's lived up to that just yet. Like, where does Caleb Williams stack up against the historical?
He's up there for me in my grades. He's right up there with Trevor Lawrence. I didn't grade Andrew Luck at the time, but I would probably say if I did, it'd probably be close to that. Like, he is to me, and there is no sure thing at quarterback. Like, that's the one thing. Like, we call these guys busts if they're not, Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. But like, if you look overall at the rate of number one picks who've gone on a quarterback, and it's not just because of their contract situation, but most of them at worst, like the guys we consider busts are guys who go on to have solid NFL careers because they don't turn into elite greats. I think there is a very good chance Caleb Williams turns into, at minimum, an above average NFL starter based on the grade I have with him. And I look at him like, the only knock I truly have on him is his size. Like, Trevor Lawrence was 6'4", Andrew Luck was like 6'4", Caleb's only 6'1", and that does matter. Like, it doesn't matter, I think, as much as it used to based on the way offenses are designed. But the fact he is 6'1" is a concern, but he's also thick. So it's like he can take a hit, he can move around, he can manipulate the pocket, all that kind of stuff that you want to see somebody who's 6'1" do. Like, Drew Brees was incredible at manipulating the pocket with his size. Caleb Williams is much more of a running threat than Drew Brees ever was, although people forget Drew could run when he was a kid. But I look at that, and it's kind of a comp that I have for Caleb is Drew Brees, just from the size perspective and the way that they can move around and get their viewing lanes.
Yeah, like, I don't think that Caleb is Jalen Hurts level of squatting, but like, if you see him in these events out of pads, he oftentimes is wearing kind of like baggier sweats. So you may not be able to tell, but like, I've seen him in like more normal workout gear a couple times just from doing a lot of the recruiting camps and stuff. He doesn't skip leg day. Like Caleb Williams is probably, I don't know, 6.5 maybe. Like 6. Like, he's not. I'm not saying he's 5'11", but like, he's not. He's not 6'3". But he does. I don't think he skips the weight room.
Well, the reason you haven't seen him outside of baggy clothes because they're very in right now. Like, if skinny jeans were in 10, you would have seen him in that. Yeah. Like, he's definitely going with the trends.
Kids are dressing like me in college.
Yeah. My thing, except he's wearing definitely high end.
You talking about my Jinkos were of the highest order, sir.
Yeah. Were you wearing $500 hoodies?
No, I was wearing just like a band t-shirt and like 25-inch Jinkos.
My thing with Caleb, I think he's close to, like all these other quarterbacks we're talking about. And oftentimes I do think this is what it boils down to. Personality, leader. I wish I had met him, even if it was only 15 minutes, because I haven't talked to him. Everybody that talks to says, oh, you're going to like him. You'll like him. Looking from the outside in, I just don't love some of the stuff. I think it's unnecessary, but I also think it could be just this generation. And I'm getting older and they're getting younger, but there's still some older guys in the locker room that you have to lead. I just hope he checks his ego at the door and goes in and is ready to work. If he does that, I think he'll be fine. But also, I didn't love, he called out McElroy. McElroy was doing an interview with The Ringer. And McElroy said, I haven't seen him face adversity. And Caleb quote tweeted it and called out McElroy. And he like put the definition of adversity. And he's like, I've been hurt. I was, I didn't start my freshman year at Oklahoma. And I went 7-5 last year. Like, how's that for adversity? That's not the adversity I think McElroy was talking about. And that's not what I'm talking about. Adversity is when your own fan base is booing you and saying you suck and we should have kept Justin Fields. Like, that's adversity. When you like have to be questioned by your own fan base. Because I think everywhere he's been pretty embraced. And it wasn't his fault they were 7-5. It was the defense and the offensive line. When you're an NFL franchise quarterback, all eyes are at you and you're going to get criticized by your own. That's where I wonder, like, how he responds to that. Like, that's what I think the adversity that he hasn't faced. And a lot of guys haven't. Like, there's been other guys
that May hasn't faced that. Michael Penix hasn't faced that. Bo, none of these guys have faced that. In college, everybody loves their quarterback.
Well, Bo Nix has.
Bo Nix has. So draft Bo Nix.
Draft Bo Nix in the top 16.
Draft Bo
And
Nix
that's
in the
where-
top
that's
in the
why I
first
think-
round. Danny
And that's
wants you
why I
to really
think,
badly.
and to your point, that's why I think we're 50-50 because we don't know how they're going to react. We don't know how anybody's going to react because most of the times it's really good. JJ McCarthy, he's a winner. You're not going to go undefeated. How does he respond to losing? Like you don't. It's just different, and you can't. That's why there's some of these things you can't measure, and you just don't know. Except with an EKG with Michael Penix, measure that heart. Let's go.
When it comes to quarterbacks, we have absolutely no idea.
Yep.
Are there any guys in this draft where you would have that sort of like Malik Willis? What the hell are they doing? Thinking this guy is going to be like a high pick type thing. I could see any of these guys succeeding potentially. I mean, some of them I think are really circumstance dependent. Like if you send Bo Nix to Denver, I don't think it's going to work. Obviously the Patriots, I don't think should draft a quarterback at all because by the time they get the rest of that roster good, you're going to have to pay him. So then you lose the opportunity to have like the veteran roster cheap quarterback year ahead of schedule thing. That's not an OG take by me. Like I've heard that on a couple smart podcasts out there, but like there's certain guys in prior drafts like that dude just can't play. Like there's no way if you watch enough college football that translates. Everybody here I think has shown at least enough to me where it could work out.
But Malik Willis dropped. Remember, it wasn't like finally everybody woke up.
By this
I
time,
think everybody can play. Everybody always comes out and they can play. It's just you don't know.
Yeah,
who's going to translate?
And again, like I just said, when it comes to quarterbacks, none of us have any earthly idea. Like the NFL hasn't gotten any better at figuring it out, and they've devoted billions of dollars trying to figure it out. But I think Bo Nix is the one that I truly do not get the most. Like I look at Bo Nix, and I'm like, there's an NFL backup, but people are talking about him as like a first or early second round pick, and I'm like, why? Like there's some things that you just typically have to see from a guy. Like if you look at the guys who do become franchise quarterbacks, there are certain traits that they have. And to me, Nix might have that leadership. He might have that kind of poise in the pocket of commanding it, but the arm just isn't there. Like it's like I don't know how that could become something that you'd look at as a first round pick. And I'll also say we talked at the beginning of the show, who's the one player that improved his opinion of you the most? And I said Jaden Daniels. I'm also still kind of skeptical of Jaden Daniels being the number 2 pick in the draft because there was the quote I saw, and again, this is stupid, but they asked him, he's like, he thinks he could be the best rushing quarterback since Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson. I don't want my quarterback's goal to be the best rushing quarterback since any of those guys, particularly when he weighs 125 pounds, but also like he took tremendous strides forward as far as his processing and getting the ball to places. But when you watch the tape, I just ask you as you go through, find the nearest defender to Malik Neighbors. Find the nearest defender to Brian Thomas. Jaden Daniels' best throws are going to guys who are wide the hell open. That is not going to be there at the NFL. So to me, the biggest question is going to be, how does he adapt to those windows? And that's why when I think of Jaden Daniels, and it could be just the PTSD of the last few years, I see Justin Fields. I see a guy who has all the ability. It's just the adapting to the NFL windows and all that kind of stuff and getting the ball out there and just being a little too quick to run.
Very high pressure to sack rate.
It concerns me.
Playing behind 2 elite NFL offensive tackle draft picks. Fields did Ohio State. Daniels did LSU. Because you're going to see like Will and Emory are going to be really high picks from LSU. Like not only is he throwing to 2 first-round receivers, I mean, those are probably 2 of your top 10 or 12 NFL draft picks next year at tackle.
That's why if I'm Washington, if I take Daniels at number 2, the very next thing I'm doing is trying to trade up so I can get one of these tackles.
Yeah. The ball does not necessarily come out quick. The pressure to sack numbers really scare me there for him. Although he did take a nice stride in 23 again, as did almost all of his game. I would take Drake May over him, and I think I might take McCarthy over him.
Yeah, I was on my top 50. I've got May at 11. I've got McCarthy at 25, and then I've got Daniels at 26. He's the 4th highest quarterback on my board.
I don't think there's anything egregious about that.
No.
Like if you have somebody other than Caleb, I kind of need an explanation, but everybody else, you can make an argument for or against, I think.
I was going to call you a homer for having Johnny Newton as high as you can, but I know Rick Spielman said he thinks he's the best D tackle over Byron Murphy.
I've actually been getting yelled at by Illini fans for having Newton at 19 and Byron Murphy at 10.
Really?
Like, I'm sorry. I just think Byron Murphy's got a quicker first step. Like, that's really all that comes down. And I think that's huge at that position. I love Johnny, and I've loved Johnny for years. I think he's going to be a good NFL player. I just think Byron Murphy has some quickness that could make him truly elite at the next level.
Especially if you're not huge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're a two-gap guy who wins with your hands, you can be a little bit slower, you know.
You know who else on your list you have at 15? Brock Bowers. I think he's he's an interesting one because we love what he did at Georgia, but my goodness, I was joking the other day, like the picture of him next to Rob Gronkowski, like shows you some of the best, and Kelsey is big, like has Gronk's size, and Bowers looks like he's in 8th grade next to him. Like he's not that big. I mean, he looks tiny. And again, he's a football player. We've seen what he can do. I do think he gets kind of like, if he goes to the Jets, I think Aaron Rodgers will figure out a way to get him the ball and they'll use him. But I think he is a liability as a blocker, and I do think that gets exposed. And like the last tight end was taking that high, Kyle Pitts, who I thought was freakishly gifted and thought he could translate.
Bowers is.
What's that?
As a I don't care what happens in the NFL, but like as a prospect eval, Pitts is way better than Bowers.
Right, and he hasn't worked, yet. Like he had not the way I thought he would. Maybe it's been quarterback dependent. Like he had a great QB play, but I don't know. We'll see. Like I think Bowers. I think he's gonna go first round. I think he probably goes top 15. Maybe it's the Jets. Maybe it's the Colts. But I'll be curious to see how he translates to the next level.
So Tom's list, I think, illustrates a really important point that if you're a college fan and you don't follow the draft as much, you might be like, damn, but Bowers is really good in college, which he was an absolute stud. The thing is, most of these teams now are wisening up and they're saying, we have to use our picks on the positions that would cost us the most in free agency if we don't have somebody internal who we can lock up on a slightly cheaper, younger deal, right? So a receiver in free agency is going to cost you like 1.7x what a tight end does. So Bowers might be a top 5 tight end in the NFL, but like you can go get pretty decent tight ends in free agency and not pay $1 million, like not pay a ton of money for them. You can't do that with receiver. Like look what the Lions just gave Amon-Ra St. Brown. So the smart teams, which now it's pretty much all of them, are starting to realize like, hey man, like we win by getting the most for our money because it's a salary cap league. So yeah, I love Brock Bowers. I wouldn't take Brock Bowers in the top 20 because of what I could get in the alternative Bowers for cheap in free agency. Like it's now maybe he makes me wrong because obviously look at the guy for the Chiefs. He's been a really, really important part of that offense, clearly, but it's rare.
And like when it comes to Bowers, a lot of focus from people on how he's 15th on my board. Not much attention to that he's still the number 1 tight end on my board, and he's the only tight end in my top 50. Like it's not that as much as it's when I look at Bowers, my concerns I think are pretty like obvious. He's a tweener. Like he might just end up being a very big slot receiver. Like I love that he's willing to block. I just have questions about how effective of a blocker he'll be at the NFL level when he's going up against NFL defensive ends. Because I do think that when you get to his lower half, he's not really built to hold up against those guys. And yeah, you're not going to, like, whoever he ends up, they're not going to be asking him to sitting in and block a lot, but you have to block. It's the NFL. You're going to have, your tight end needs to block. If he's not, he's just a big slot receiver. And I don't want a big slot receiver with my top 20 pick.
The Brock Bowers is a divisive one. You've been digging in on that one for a long time, so understand on that. All right, let's we do always promise to get interactive. Let's do